Hey guys, what is up? Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about all the books that I read in the month of June and July, since I didn't get around to filming a June wrap up last month. So I do have a lot of books to talk about. I want to keep this intro very short, but if you want to see what I'm up to on a day-to-day basis, Twitter and Instagram are the best place to do that. It's Kendra Cus, at Kendra Cus, just like it is here. And also I have a bookstagram, which I need to post on more, but if you want to see what that is all about, it's at Kendra Cus Reads. So let's go ahead and get right on into it. First things first, we are going to pretend like my hair is not frizzy and looks like I've been electrocuted and all the hairs are standing up. We're gonna pretend like that's not the case. Thank you. Go ahead and keep watching. So as I said, I had no time to film a June wrap up, and honestly it's probably my own fault. I was just lazy and I probably had time, but I didn't have time. So the first book I read in June is called A Spectacle of Souls. So I ended up DNFing this book at 60%. I thought the concept was really cool. Essentially, this girl who has chronic headaches finds out that her chronic headaches are actually like powers, and there's this traveling circus, and there's this supposed to be this mysterious boy and stuff, and it felt very Caraval to me, but it's supposed to be more modern, like an urban fantasy and stuff, but it was genuinely not good. I typically do not say stuff like that. Like, I genuinely think that there's always a piece of a book that's good. I just feel really bad saying that, but in this case it was not good. Felt very immature. It was supposed to be new adult, but it felt like I was reading 14-year-olds. It was very repetitive. It said the same things over and over again. Like, these characters are supposed to be post-high school, but I felt like I was reading about 15-year-olds. Also, the author would sometimes jump back and forth between third person. It was just so confusing. Like, I did not know whose mind we were in when. And I did get this as an ARC on NetGalley, so that's where I found it. I thought the concept looked really cool, but I ended up being pretty disappointed. So that was the first one. So the next book I read really helped restore faith in reading for me, and that was Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. I did tab this. This was actually the first book I started to tab. I loved this so much. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, and I just thought it was so good. Like, this had some of the sweetest romance I've ever read, and I really rooted for both characters. Both Chloe and Red have very distinct different personalities, but they relate to each other through their differences, and I thought that was beautiful. I also loved the representation in this book, and though I cannot speak to the representation as like if it was done well or not, I felt like it was a beautiful addition to this book, and these characters were so beautiful, and I loved everything about this. I also loved I won't give away any spoilers, but I loved the like third act conflict, because it didn't feel like it was a miscommunication trope, or like it didn't feel like these characters, like a lot of times in romance, the third act conflict ends up being like something that doesn't feel very genuine to their relationship, but I knew that they could get over it, and it felt true to them, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. Loved it. The next book I read is one of the most shocking reads this year. It has become a favorite book of all time, and that is The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. As you can see, I also tabbed the hell out of this book, and I love this book so much, and I did not expect to. I know that this is old. I think it came out in 2011, and basically what had happened was I loved the Raven Boys so much, and this one person I follow on Goodreads who also loves the Raven Boys said it's one of her favorite books. I saw her review on this book, and she said this she loved even more, and I was like, okay, I gotta give it a shot. So if you don't know anything about this book, we have two main characters. One's name is Sean, and the other one's name is Puck. Well, her real name is Kate, but everyone calls her Puck. That's like her nickname. And they live on this island, which every single year in November, there are what they call the Scorpio races, which are these monster-like horses that come from the sea. And you try and tame them, and you try and race them, and whoever wins a bunch of money. And both Puck and Sean have their own motivations for winning this money. It's just, I don't know, like, I honestly don't know. Like, everything about this book is so beautiful. The very dark, moody atmosphere of this island is one of my favorite things. Like, it was so intriguing to read about. Literally all the other characters besides a couple are very unlikable, but not in like a shallow way. Like, it's so intriguing to read about. Puck and Sean have a side little subplot of romance, which is so beautiful and such a sweet little addition to this book. Like, It wasn't overwhelming or anything, but it felt very natural to their personalities as well as to the story, and it was so stunning. Like, one of my favorite quotes is, so it says, I say, and this is Puck's point of view, I will not be your weakness, Sean Kendrick. Now he looks at me. He says very softly, it's late for that, Puck. It's just so beautiful. They developed such a sincere friendship beforehand, and I think that's why I loved them together so much, and the moody broodiness of this whole story and the darkness to it, and it's kind of just doomed. Like, everything feels very doomed, and it's just such a beautiful story. Loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. I literally could not find one thing wrong with that book, okay? The next book shocked me to my core. Like, I was shook, okay? It is Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. If you have been a friend of mine, I have not shut up about this book, so you probably have heard it. Look at all those tabs. Look at all that. I don't know if you can see that. This was an instant 5-star. From the moment, like, for the first 50 pages, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like the love interest because he's kind of a dick. After that, every single page of this book I savored. It was so beautiful. This is an adult romance, and it is a historical fiction romance, and it is between Annabelle and the Duke of Montgomery. So everyone calls him Montgomery. His real name is Sebastian, but everyone calls him Montgomery. This is such a beautiful book. First of all, you have like a grumpy kind of Duke guy, like grumpy as an attitude. Obviously he's attractive and he's sought after and everything, but you have this grumpy dude, and then you have this ambitious, young, like full of life girl, and they fall in love on accident, and it's just one of the most beautiful romances. My favorite romances, which I've talked about before, are the ones that are like doomed from the start. These two people cannot be together. She's a country girl and he's a duke. Like, they are not allowed to be together, but they have to be together, you know what I mean? It is so beautiful. Literally, it is one of those books where it will rip your heart out of your chest 1,000,010 times, but it is 100% worth it. Like, so beautiful. I loved every moment of this. This is might be my favorite read of 2020, and I want everyone to read this. It is peak yearning and longing and pining, and for me, in a romance, there has to be yearning and longing in order for me to really pick up on this romance. There was so much yearning and longing in this book that, like, it was the, anyways, I would talk about this for forever, so I'm gonna stop there. So the next book I read in the month of June was The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. I gave this 3.75 stars. I know that seems like a little picky, but I thought this was a really fun book. The plot of this is that our main character, which I don't even remember their names, honestly. What is their, it states with an A, right? Alessandra, and then the Shadow King, I think you find out his name further on in the book and I can't be bothered. But anyways, Alessandra's plan is to woo the Shadow King, marry him, and then kill him to then be queen. And I think a lot of people pitch this as enemies to lovers, but I genuinely think it's like minor enemies to friends to lovers. And I think it was such a beautiful story of how they developed a friendship and started relying on each other. Basically, they decided to start courting each other in order to help them both in this world. The Shadow King needs to get married in order to keep his kingly status. He helps her out in a lot of stuff. Anyways, it was really sweet. I really liked it. As far as plot goes, there wasn't really much of a plot, and I did not love the like third act conflict, but other than that, I thought this was a really fun read. I really enjoyed the chemistry between the two characters, and I thought that they both had very deeply flawed personalities, which is something I love to read about, with somebody that comes across as like very ambitious in a certain way, and then you find out like all their flaws and everything. Anyways, really great story. 3.75 stars. It's a quick read. If you want to just pick something up and fly through it, this is a good one for you. So the next two books I read were rereads, and they're two of my favorite books of all time. And the first one is Graceling by Kristen Gishore. I actually tabbed my paperback, and I don't know why, but I can't find it anywhere. And I literally just found it. Let me go grab that. So as I was saying, I tabbed this like crazy. This felt amazing to reread. This was so good because the other one I read is Fire, which I'll talk about in a second. And Fire is like my favorite book of all time, or always has been. I'm not sure if it still is, but it really, it means a lot to me, okay? But Graceling was like one of my favorite books of all time. Because of that, I have read Fire way more times than I've read Graceling. But do you see all these tabs? Like, this was such an amazing experience. This, like, I think I put in my review, Poe from this book is like PETA level, like god tier, best male protagonist in YA fantasy. Like, Poe is amazing. He's one of the best characters ever written. And I also love Katza. I named my cat after Katza. And I love this story. If you don't know much about this world, well, this is an old book. Like, this came out in 2008, I think, or something. But there is a world where people are graced, and if they have this, they are called gracelings, and they have 2 different color eyes. And as soon as their eyes develop when they're young, the king usually will like take them and use them for his personal gain. And her Katza is actually kind of under the control, for lack of a better term, of her uncle, who is the king, and her grace is to kill. And so she's basically this like assassin style character, and she hates her life and ends up kind of leaving and taking a journey with Poe to go find something and do something, which you'll see if you read this book. This book is so beautiful. This is also something that's like friends to lovers. One of the things that Kristin Kishore does so well is she develops her characters individually and together in such a beautiful and intricate way that you truly fully believe in them together. And I love this book so much. Like, look at all those tabs. It was just so good. And then I don't have a paperback version of this, but this is my original Fire, which is like beat to, like, look at that. Like, it is definitely loved, well loved. I still have old notes in here that are written in purple pen. But then when I went through, like, if you can see, there's like purple pen on that paper too. I don't know if you can tell. But this is a prequel kind of to Graceling. It takes place like 50 years before, I believe. But it is so good. Briggan and Fire are like my OTP forever. Like, again, it's just, in this sense, it's definitely more of like enemies to friends to lovers. One thing that Briggan and Fire do is that they rely on each other in such a trusting way. Like, they begin to ask each other questions that they could maybe go to someone else for, but they trust each other's opinion and they trust each other's knowledge. And it is so beautiful. And also, I love the conflict in this book. There's so many dynamic characters. I think the reason I love Fire a little bit more than Graceling is there's a little bit bigger of a cast that you follow, and every single one of these characters is so deeply flawed and dynamic, and it's so interesting to read about. And the relationships with Fire and the relationships with the other characters, like, I love reading about it. It's so good. And look at all those tabs. I'm so happy I did this reread. So happy. And then I read The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This is a book I've had since last year. It's been on my TBR since last summer, but I just never got around to it. I gave this book 3 stars. I think actually maybe even 3.5. I think it was 3.5, yeah. I really liked this, especially up until like the 70% mark. I loved this. And then I really disliked what happened in the last 30%, and I think that's why I ended up getting a 3.5 star and not a 4 star. Because I definitely could have seen this being a 4 star if it continued on. I love the plot behind this. Like, I definitely think it's like unrealistic, but it was very fun to follow. Like, our main character goes to her twin sister's wedding. Everyone there gets food poisoning except for her, because she's allergic to shellfish, and they served like shrimp or crab at the wedding. And then her mortal enemy, essentially, which is her twin sister's new husband's brother, who hates buffets because he's like a germaphobe, so he doesn't eat out of buffets. So they're the only 2 people that don't get sick, and she has to take her sister's honeymoon because it was like a contest win, and you could only go at this time, and she didn't want to waste the win. And so the main character takes it with this brother, and so it's basically like shared hotel room trope, and they're in Hawaii and they fall in love, and then something happens where they need to kind of fake date, and so they have that trope as well. I loved this until the last 30%. I don't think it's bad, it just didn't really vibe with me, so that's why I got a 3.5 star, but it was really fun and it was a perfect summer read, and I'm really glad I read it in the summer. The last book I read in the month of June was A Rogue of One's Own, which is the sequel to Bringing Down the Duke. I did get lucky enough to get this arc on NetGalley, and I was thrilled because honestly, Bringing Down the Duke, I think, was my favorite read of 2020, and I was so excited. Bringing Down the Duke's main character is Annabelle, and then in A Rogue of One's Own, our main character is Lucy. Why am I forgetting her name? Yeah, Lucy. So Lucy is one of Annabelle's friends in the first book, and then in the next book in this series is going to take place with another one of the friends that was in the first book. So like everybody kind of gets their own romance in a sense. I actually was so excited for this that I was slightly disappointed in the book. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I don't think it's a bad book, but in comparison to the first one, it's vastly just not as great. Like, the first book is flawless in my opinion. The second book, I had a lot of feelings towards it. There was basically no romance till the 50% mark, and that doesn't really make sense to me if it's a romance book. Like, even if there's just like a big build up to the romance, there usually has to be some sort of like flirtations or something back and forth, and there just wasn't a lot of that. The first 50% focused more on Lucy just being upset and trying to conquer certain things, which I do think it was well done, but this is a historical romance book. This is not like a literary fiction or historical fiction book, you know what I mean? So it is supposed to be a romance. And the other thing that I didn't like about it was there was basically no time spent to add in yearning and longing. So because the romance didn't really start till the 50% mark, they only had the last 30% or 40% to develop a relationship before the like third act conflict. And it just didn't leave room for enough development for me to care about them enough individually and together. And also there was no like yearning and longing, which, as I've stated before, is like my favorite part of a romance book. All of that to say, I did really enjoy being back in this setting, in this historical fiction world that Evie Dunmore has sort of created. I loved seeing a little bit of Annabelle. She was in this book a little bit. I didn't see enough of Montgomery, but that's fine. I understand why. You know, I just really miss him. He was the best. And yeah, I do think it was a really good book, and I think you'll like it. I just don't think it really holds a flame to the first book. The first book just has the best characters ever, with such intriguing backstories and such a beautiful romance, and this book just doesn't really have that same feel. So yeah, so those were all the books I read in June, which I don't even know how many books that is. Let's see here. So that was technically 9. Even though the first book was a DNF, I read 60% of it, so I'm counting it, okay? To start off July, I read The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa. I was like not overly excited for this, but I was pretty excited for it because I've heard some pretty good things. And I ended up giving this 3 stars. I thought it was a good book, but I personally didn't really connect. I thought that our love interest, Max, was way too cheesy and way too unrealistic, and like I've never in my life met a guy like that. And then our main character, Lena, I really liked her. She was really ambitious. I loved her entrepreneurial spirit. I loved like that side of the book because I really liked her, but I just didn't really vibe with the way they got together. And I didn't love our love interest. And also the smut scenes, like sometimes there were certain things said during the scenes that took me out of it. I was like, ooh, I don't like that. Like that was kind of awkward. I don't like that. So that's just me though. I don't think it's a bad book. Like I really like the concept. Lena is supposed to get married to this guy. I don't even remember his name, honestly. Anyways, she's supposed to get married. Literally the morning of the wedding, he calls off the wedding, and she finds out that it was his brother that talked him into calling off the wedding. So now she hates her ex-fiance and also her ex-fiance's brother. 2 years later, she's a wedding planner, and she runs into her ex-fiance's brother, whose name is Max, and they end up having to work together for one of her jobs, and that is how they're brought together. The plot, I think, was great. It was super intriguing and super fun, but yeah, other than that, didn't really love it so much. But a 3-star book, pretty good, can't really complain. The next book I read was a hit, and that was Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. I was so excited to read this because I loved Get a Life, Chloe Brown so much. I loved this even more. Like, I don't think I gave this 5 stars. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, but I loved it more than the first one, which is shocking because Danny has the personality where she says like, I don't want a relationship, I'm not a relationship person, I'm just a either hit it and quit it or friends with benefits person. And like, I think that's great, like you do you. It's just so opposite to my personality, so I wasn't sure I was gonna love this book because of that. But I loved this book. I just kind of had more of a thing for Zephyr in this book than I did for Red in Chloe Brown, and I think that's why I like this book a little more too. And also I love Danny, like she is so funny. Zephyr made me laugh multiple times. Both of them, their chemistry, their banter, it's literally just incredible. And I loved the plot behind this. I loved every minute of this. Like truly, it was just so good. I love the setup. Like I thought it was so cute for there to be a fire drill and for Zephyr to go in and save her. And then on social media, everyone thinks they're dating. So now they like fake date for fun. And it's just, it was so cute. The smut in this book was great. Their chemistry was great. It was so sweet. And this book also deals with some pretty heavy topics, but I feel that it does it very well. So I can't really speak too much to them, but from what I read and what I feel like it's just so beautiful and done really well. So I definitely recommend this series. The next book was a little bit of a disappointment for me, and that was The Song of Race and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. I was so excited for this. This was one of my most anticipated reads for this year, and I actually ended up DNFing it at around 65%, and I'll tell you why, because I have some like genuine reasons as to why. And if I read it, you can't hate me, okay? Like I have so many books to talk about. So the reasons I didn't vibe with this, and I gave it 2 stars, and I feel like I can give it a rating because I did read 60% of it. Anyways, multiple accounts of animal harm. There is an author note at the beginning, which I want to make sure is noted. It says, please note this book depicts issues of mild self-harm, ideation, fantasy violence, emotional and physical abuse, anxiety and panic attacks, parental death, and animal death. It said animal death, so I thought maybe it'll just be one off screen. No, there are multiple accounts of animal sacrifice or harm. It's not death, it's animal sacrifice, which really pissed me off. There were innocent animals that were being sacrificed for no reason. I understand that there are cultural differences and that I may not understand a way something happens, but personally, I do not make any sort of excuses for animal death. There is enough animal cruelty and harm going out there in the world that I do not need to subject myself to that in a book, and I definitely don't have any sort of, like I just don't make excuses for it. Also, it's really descriptive, and it was innocent animals, like innocent animals that were brought into these trials just to be killed. That's the problem, okay? The next thing was I never once was able to connect with either characters. They both acted very young for me, like 14 and wildly naive and immature. It was very info dumpy. The characters didn't even meet till the 55% mark, and this is pitched as Aladdin and Jasmine as if they were meant to kill each other. I just think it's false marketing to pitch it as that because they don't even meet till the 55% mark. And also it was very insta-lovey, and so that's kind of why I just decided I don't care anymore. The things I did like though, I did like the Malik character. I don't know if it's Malik or Malik, but I am a One Direction stan from the day they were created. So anytime I see the word Malik, it's Zayn Malik, and so his name is Malik to me, okay? I enjoyed him. I liked the representation that the author brought with his character. I also like that he was a refugee because I feel like it's pretty rare in a lot of the books I read. I love the culture and mythology. I just wish it was told in a better way. I really loved the mythology and I wanted to know more, but it was so info dumpy that it was hard to keep up, and I ended up then losing interest because I couldn't keep up because it was info dumpy. And there were quite a few intriguing characters, but I just don't think we saw enough of them for me to continue to care about them. That is why I DNF'd it. I know a lot of other people who really love this book, and so I'm not saying it's a bad book. For me, it was a 2-star read, and it is what it is. The next book kind of like restored like my love for reading again, because that really put me in a reading slump, and that is This Is How You Lose the Time War. I was actually watching Read with Cindy's video, I think, and she was talking about this, and we have 2 characters, right? We have red and blue, so I tabbed it with red and blue tabs depending on who's talking or who's, you know, whoever's chapter or quote it is, that's what I tabbed. And this was amazing. So this is a book that is very different from anything I've ever read. It's kind of like sci-fi but it's kind of hard to describe. So we have our two characters who are kind of enemies. They're both from different agencies, and basically the purpose of these agencies is to travel through time and make sure certain events go a certain way so that they can win the time war. It's very confusing. The point is not to be an expansive world that you understand. The point is to literally, so my camera ran out of memory card space, so I had to delete some things and I don't remember what I left off saying. But these two people are enemies, and they write letters to each other throughout this time war, throughout different time periods, and it is so beautiful. This is a sapphic romance. This is so stunning. There was so much almost like seduction, even though they didn't even meet up with each other like while they're talking to each other, because it's through letters. It was so just sensual still, and so, oh my, like, there was so much yearning and longing and pining going on. Like literally, let me see if I can pull up a quote. So Blue asks Red if she's ever felt hunger. And Blue says, but hunger is a many splendored thing. It needn't be conceived only by limbic terms in biology. Hunger, Red, to sate a hunger or to stoke it, to feel a hunger as a furnace, to trace its edges like a teeth, is a thing you singly know. Have you ever had the hunger that whetted itself on what you fed, sharpened so keen and bright that it might split you open, break a new thing out? And then Red responds and says, but the hunger you describe, that blade jutting from the skin, the weathering as of a hillside struck by a storm, the hollowness, it sounds beautiful and familiar. And like, this book is just so stunning. Like, here's another quote. Red rarely sleeps, but when she does, she lies still, eyes closed in the dark, and lets herself see lapis, taste iris petals and ice, hear a blue jay shriek. She collects blues and keeps them. And that's like at the beginning of her realizing she's falling in love with Blue. It is just so amazing. Blue is definitely my favorite character. I feel like I related to her a little bit more, but another mention of hunger. She goes, Blue says this to Red in a letter. I hope it isn't a burden at the same time that I want you to be seared by it. I want to sharpen your hungers fully as much as I long to satisfy them, one letter seed at a time. It is just so sexy, but also so beautiful. I love this book. Also, as they start to fall in love, they start to call each other like things that are blue or red, but like not just saying hi Blue or dear Blue. Like one of those was like dear strawberry. Anyways, so beautiful. I definitely recommend this. It's kind of like a novella length, and the twist at the end, amazing. And then the very last book I read in the month of July, because July was definitely not a great month for me. I think I read 5 books if we're counting the one I DNF'd, which I do count. So anyways, this is Axioms End by Lindsay Ellis. If you don't know who Lindsay Ellis is, she's an amazing YouTuber. She does video essays, a lot of times talks about movies and stuff like that. She's amazing. I love her. Her videos are very well done. You can tell she spends hours and hours, like her team spends hours and hours and hours on these videos. Their script's amazing and everything. She wrote this book. It came out last month. It is basically about this girl named Cora who has an unfortunate event happen to her, and she ends up essentially being the interpreter between one of the aliens that is on Earth and the humans. And her father is kind of this like whistleblower, and he's leaking information to the world that the government is trying to hide, which is the aliens and the alien invasion and how the aliens have been on the planet for a very long time. This is an alternate reality sci-fi kind of book because it takes place in 2007 during like the Bush era United States. And I wasn't sure how I was gonna feel about this, but I really wanted to give it a shot because I really love Lindsay Ellis. I did tab this quite a lot mainly because I was trying to keep up and I wanted to tab major plot points, but also I fell in love with Ampersand, who is the alien that Cora ends up like having a relationship with to a certain extent because she becomes the interpreter between him and the humans. And he comes off as kind of like without a personality. He's very intelligent and intellectual, and everything sounds like a scientific or mathematical equation. Kind of the way he says it just makes it sound that way. But then when he starts to build this friendship and trust in Cora, you can really see his personality shine. There's one point where he mentions like aliens, their like species of aliens don't really have emotions or aren't supposed to, but then you start to see how like deeply emotional he is and how he tries to hide it, and it's just, I love him so much. I will definitely be continuing on with this series. It left off on kind of a cliffhanger that I loved, and I'm really intrigued. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. The reason it didn't get 5 stars for me was because I did find myself having a hard time keeping up, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I am kind of a newbie to the sci-fi genre, but I think this was a really intriguing story. That being said, if you're not into aliens or sci-fi, I wouldn't pick this up. I don't think it's the book for you. I just happen to really like ampersand, and I think that's what really made me intrigued. There's a lot of power dynamics between the aliens, which was also my favorite part, like trying to figure out what's going on behind the scenes. And as we are in Cora's brain only, it's always like what's going on. Like ampersand's only telling her so much, but clearly so much more is going on. It's so good. Okay guys, that is going to be my video. Those are all the books I read in the month of June and July. I know it's a lot, and I know I was talking for a lot, so if you're still here, thank you. And if you share any of the same thoughts with me, or if you've read any of these books, let me know down below in the comment section. But anyways, I'm gonna let you guys go. Have a great morning, noon, evening, day, night, whenever happens to be that you're watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.